The air inside St. Brigid's Cathedral was thick with anticipation. Candlelight danced across vaulted ceilings as guests whispered among themselves, their designer heels clicking softly on the marble floors. Ava Sinclair stood at the head of the aisle, the soft strains of a string quartet swelling behind her, her ivory silk gown cascading in ripples around her feet. Her eyes were locked on Nathan Whitmore, the love of her life, waiting at the altar with a trembling smile. This was the moment every little girl dreamed of, and Ava had earned it. Every bouquet tasting, seating chart scuffle, and couture fitting had built toward this grand culmination. The Whitmores were American royalty, old money, political pedigree, and a name that opened doors in every circle that mattered. Ava, a public relations maven with a humble upbringing and a dazzling charm, had climbed the ranks and captured the most eligible bachelor in New York. But dreams, she would soon learn, could turn into nightmares with the flick of a wrist. Just as Ava reached the final step of the aisle, Vivienne Whitmore, Nathan's statuesque mother in a silver Dior gown, stepped forward from the front pew. With the poise of a practiced socialite, she held out a hand, not to shake, not to embrace, but to slap. Crack! The sound echoed through the cathedral like a gunshot. Ava's head jerked to the side, her veil whipping across her cheek as the crowd gasped in unison. Time froze. Her fingers rose instinctively to her stinging skin, her breath caught between rage and disbelief. And then Vivienne's voice, smooth and sharp as broken glass, cut through the stunned silence. "How dare you touch me, you dirty girl!" A murmur rippled through the pews. Guests exchanged looks. Was this a performance? A prank? Nathan stood frozen, the blood draining from his face as he stared at the scene unfolding in front of him, as if his mind couldn't catch up with reality. Ava blinked rapidly, trying to stabilize the spinning room. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. "Vivienne, what are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice thin. But Vivienne merely turned on her heel and walked away, calm as ever, clutching her clutch like a gavel passed down from God. The cathedral doors creaked as she exited, her stiletto heels clicking like a judge's final sentence. Whispers became chaos. Cell phones were out. Paparazzi camped outside got wind of the drama within minutes. The wedding was postponed indefinitely, guests escorted to limousines with apologies and uncertainty. Ava was escorted to the bridal suite by her bridesmaids, hands trembling, lipstick smudged from tears she didn't remember shedding. Nathan eventually appeared, eyes hollow, lips pressed in a line. He tried to offer comfort but gave no explanations. That night, while the media speculated wildly about betrayal and family feuds, Ava stared at herself in the mirror. Her cheek still bore a faint red mark, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside her. Vivienne had declared war, and Ava intended to find out why. The tabloids had a field day. Within hours of the altar slap, headlines splashed across every screen and social feed. Heiress from hell? Vivienne Whitmore attacks bride at wedding. Slap heard round Fifth Avenue. Dirty girl? Dirty secrets? Ava's face was everywhere, mid-flinch in some photos, steely-eyed in others, always framed by a veil that now felt like a noose. She stayed holed up in the penthouse suite of the Whitmore family hotel, a sterile luxury cage made of velvet and judgment. The press camped outside like vultures. Her phone buzzed non-stop with calls from journalists, former colleagues, and social media trolls. Even her distant relatives from Ohio were suddenly, quote, concerned. But Vivienne, silent. 3 days passed before Ava had the courage and rage to confront her. She arrived unannounced at the Whitmore estate in the Hamptons. The staff, clearly instructed not to intervene, let her in without a word. The estate was all cold marble, antique mirrors, and the ghost of generational money. Ava found Vivienne in the conservatory, pruning white orchids with surgical precision. "You owe me an explanation," Ava said, her voice sharp, steady. Vivienne didn't flinch. "And you owe the Whitmore name an apology." Ava crossed the room in 3 strides. "You slapped me in front of 300 people and called me a dirty girl. Why?" Vivienne set her pruning shears down with slow elegance and turned, her expression unreadable. "Because the truth is dirtier than you realize. You should never have set foot in our world, and Nathan never should have proposed to you. You think I'm beneath you? That's not truth. That's classism. Try again." Vivienne tilted her head, a faint smirk curling her lips. "I have evidence, Ava, concrete proof that you've lied about who you are, your background, your intentions, your very identity." Ava's breath caught in her chest. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Vivienne raised a manicured brow. "Let me give you some advice, dear. You can either walk away quietly and disappear, or I'll make sure the entire world knows what kind of woman you really are." Ava's fury burned hot beneath her skin. "If you have proof, show it. Otherwise, keep your threats to yourself." Vivienne smiled thinly. "Some truths reveal themselves in time. Others," she said, turning back to her orchids, "must be dug up." The next morning, Ava found a small envelope slid under her hotel room door. No return address. Inside, a single, typed note. "Ask your mother who attended the Whitmore fundraiser in 1991. The truth began there. Beneath it, a photo, slightly faded, slightly grainy, but unmistakable. A man with silver hair, Senator Charles Whitmore, arms wrapped around a young woman who looked hauntingly like Ava, her stomach twisted. She hadn't spoken to her estranged mother in nearly a decade. But now, it seemed, Lorraine held answers to questions Ava didn't know she needed to ask. As she stared at the photo, another thought crept in like a draft under a locked door. What if Vivienne wasn't just protecting her son from scandal? What if she was protecting a far more dangerous secret? Ava realized something else in that moment. This wasn't just about humiliation. This was a warning. And warnings, she knew, were usually issued when someone was getting close to something they weren't supposed to find. The photo haunted her. Ava stared at it under the sterile glow of her hotel suite's desk lamp, the city lights blinking in the distance like silent Morse code. The image was no more than a 5x7 print, matte finished and aged, but it carried the weight of a wrecking ball. Senator Charles Whitmore, dead nearly 20 years, smiled effortlessly in a navy tuxedo, his hand resting on the waist of a young woman with wavy auburn hair and sharp cheekbones. Lorraine Sinclair, Ava's mother. On the back of the photo, in looping black ink, were 4 cryptic words: "Our secret, 1991, C." Ava hadn't spoken to her mother in years, not since a catastrophic fight that left both women scorched. Lorraine had always been evasive about Ava's father, dismissing questions with flippant remarks and flaring tempers. She insisted Ava had been a miracle from a summer mistake, and nothing more. But now, staring into the face of a man who might be her biological father, Ava's world tilted. She needed answers, but before she could confront Lorraine, she needed something more solid than a photo and an unsigned note. That's when she contacted Max. Max Donovan was a journalist Ava once represented during his meteoric rise. He owed her. Within 24 hours, he had dug through digital archives, calling in favors from political historians, museum curators, and scandal junkies. He found the guest list from the 1991 Whitmore Foundation fundraiser, held at the Hotel Delacroix in Washington, D.C. Lorraine Sinclair was on it, listed as Lorraine Whitaker, consultant, Whitaker Strategies, a firm Ava had never heard of, a company that no longer existed. "She used a different last name," Ava whispered as she stared at the scanned document Max had sent. She was hiding who she was even back then. But that wasn't all. Max also found a record of hotel expenses from that weekend. 2 rooms were billed to the Whitmore Campaign Fund, room 1203 under Charles Whitmore, room 1204 under Lorraine Whitaker. Next door. Her heart hammered. This was no coincidence. Something had happened that weekend. Something intimate, something her mother had kept buried for over 30 years. There was only one way to find out the truth. She made an appointment for a discreet DNA test the next morning, using a hairbrush she had saved from her mother years ago, still packed away in a keepsake box from their final bitter encounter. For the comparison sample, she paid extra for access to a public genealogy database where Charles Whitmore's DNA was stored, courtesy of an authorized political family ancestry archive. She submitted the samples and told herself not to panic. But as the days passed, anxiety clawed at her ribs like vines wrapping around stone. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Nathan reached out twice, short, confused texts, but Ava ignored him. If what she feared was true, everything between them was built on a lie too tangled to unwind. On the fourth day, the results arrived in her inbox. Ava sat alone in her darkened suite, shaking fingers hovering over her laptop as the page loaded. Probability of parentage, 99.97%. Biological father, Charles Benjamin Whitmore. The room blurred around her. A pressure filled her chest like air sucked from a vacuum. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just sat there, still as glass, while her mind rewrote her entire identity in slow, merciless strokes. Vivienne's slap. The photo. The threats. They weren't about social standing or wealth or control. They were about blood. And Ava had just uncovered the first layer of a secret that would shatter the powerful Whitmore family from the inside out. The world outside Ava's suite moved on. Traffic throbbed, stock tickers ran, headlines shifted to the next scandal. But for Ava, time had frozen. The DNA results sat open on her laptop, the screen casting a cold glow across her face. Charles Whitmore, biological father. Nathan Whitmore, half-brother. She repeated the words silently, as if trying to dilute their meaning by breaking them down into syllables. She felt sick. Her entire body tingled with numb disbelief as she stared at the ceiling, her mind a war zone of shattered memories and false foundations. Every kiss with Nathan. Every whispered promise. Every stolen moment that had once felt so rare and perfect, now tainted, now grotesque. A love story twisted into a forbidden tragedy. But the pain of betrayal was second only to the fury that burned underneath. Vivienne had known. She had to. No woman slaps another at a wedding altar and screams, "Dirty girl," unless she's trying to prevent something catastrophic. It hadn't been discussed at Ava's manners or background. It had been a last-minute attempt to stop the wedding before a truth too terrible to name became cemented by vows and legal ties. Ava's first instinct was to run, to disappear into obscurity and let the scandal rot without her, but something in her refused to leave. Not like this. Not when the Whitmores continued to operate behind veils of honor and prestige, hiding skeletons behind silver forks and whitewashed walls. She quietly broke off the engagement. No explanation. No dramatic scene. Just a phone call to Nathan, curt, breathless, rehearsed, and a single line. "I can't marry you, I'm sorry." He had begged for clarity, for context. She gave none. She couldn't tell him. How could she? How do you tell the man you love that his dead father is your dead father too? The press picked up the broken engagement within hours. Pundits speculated about everything from infidelity to Ava's mental state. Some suggested she was emotionally unstable. Others wondered if Vivienne had forced her out. A popular gossip blog suggested Ava had stolen from the Whitmore Foundation and was fleeing the spotlight before charges hit. That one cut deep. Nathan retreated from the public eye, heartbroken and confused. Vivienne, on the other hand, seized the opportunity to rehabilitate the family's image. She began parading Nathan around to social functions, hinting at a potential engagement between him and Amelia Vanderbilt, a trust fund socialite with glossy credentials and an Instagram presence built on champagne, yachts, and platitudes. Ava watched it all from a distance. She should have felt jealousy, bitterness, but all she felt was resolve. This wasn't over. Vivienne had manipulated her life, poisoned her relationship, and almost allowed two unknowing siblings to marry. And now she was trying to quietly sweep the whole affair under a velvet rug of public distraction. No, Ava would not be erased. She began collecting every document, photo, and detail from the past 2 months, cross-referencing political timelines, donation ledgers, and family archives. If her life had been rewritten by someone else's secrets, then she would seize the pen back. Vivienne Whitmore had fired the first shot. Ava was ready to return fire, and this time, it wouldn't be at the altar. The coastal bus rolled through fog-draped hills, its windows streaked with rain and time. Ava sat near the back, a scarf pulled low over her forehead and sunglasses hiding tired, sleepless eyes. It had taken weeks to find her mother, Lorraine Sinclair, after hitting countless dead ends, ignored messages, and one voicemail that had simply said, "If you're calling to dig up ghosts, they're already dancing." Lorraine had vanished from the public record years ago. No driver's license renewals, no credit history, no permanent address. But through a former neighbor's tip and Max Donovan's quiet persistence, Ava finally tracked her to a decaying cottage along the windswept coast of Maine. When she arrived, the air smelled of salt and moss and dying leaves. The house leaned slightly to one side like it had grown tired of standing straight. Paint peeled from the wood like a slow confession. And there, on a weathered porch swing wrapped in blankets and silence, sat Lorraine, older, thinner, with oxygen tubes in her nose and a cigarette still defiantly burning between her fingers. "You look just like him," Lorraine said before Ava could speak. Her voice was raspy, time-worn, and devoid of surprise. Ava blinked. "Like who?" Lorraine exhaled. "Charles." No denial, no hesitation, just confirmation, like it was the most ordinary truth in the world. "You knew?" Ava asked, her voice cracking under the weight of it. Lorraine nodded slowly, coughing into her sleeve. "Of course I knew. I lived it." Inside the house, the walls were lined with old photographs of a life Ava had never been part of. Lorraine fixed tea from a cracked pot and added 2 sugars just like she used to when Ava was a child. It was surreal. This tiny domestic gesture in the middle of an emotional minefield. "I need to know everything," Ava said, her voice trembling. "Did you love him? Was I just a mistake? Did you ever think I deserved the truth?" Lorraine looked tired, bone deep, soul weary, but her eyes sharpened at Ava's words. "I loved Charles Whitmore more than I should have, more than was safe. He was married, powerful, dangerous in ways I didn't understand until too late. He promised to leave Vivienne. He never did." "And me?" Ava asked. "I found out I was pregnant 2 months after he stopped returning my calls. He wanted me to disappear, to do the right thing. His words, not mine. I said no, I kept you. But I changed my name. I buried the affair. I wanted to protect you, even if it meant losing you." A long silence settled between them. "But," Lorraine continued softly, "Charles isn't your father, Ava." Ava's breath hitched. "What?" "I lied. Or, I let people believe it. I needed money. I needed protection. When Vivienne started sniffing around, threatening me, I panicked. I told her Charles was your father, so she'd leave me alone. She believed me. Or pretended to." "You're saying I'm not his daughter?" Ava's voice shook with disbelief and growing dread. "I'm saying," Lorraine whispered, reaching for a faded envelope from a drawer, "that Vivienne ran a DNA test. And when the results didn't say what she wanted, she changed them." Inside the envelope were letters, some typed, some handwritten, bank transfer slips, and at the bottom, a thumb drive. On it, an audio file labeled Confession JM. "She paid someone to falsify the results," Lorraine said. "All to stop your wedding." Ava's head swam. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" she asked. Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was ashamed, and now I'm dying. But I won't let her bury the truth with me." Outside, the storm rolled in. Thunder cracked in the distance like the universe itself was listening. Ava held the envelope like a sacred key. Vivienne Whitmore had built her empire on lies. But the voice from the past was finally ready to speak, and Ava was finally ready to listen. Ava hadn't cried when the wedding collapsed. She hadn't cried when she read the DNA results that shattered her future. She hadn't even cried when her mother confessed to the lie that had detonated everything. But when she played the audio file on that thumb drive, alone, in her hotel suite with the curtains drawn and her world spinning, tears finally came. The voice was raspy, male, and anxious. "This is James Monroe. I worked for the Whitmore Foundation as a forensic liaison. I was asked to intercept and falsify a DNA test submitted by Ava Sinclair. Vivienne Whitmore ordered it. I replaced the original results with a fabricated report identifying Charles Whitmore as Ava's biological father. I knew it was wrong, I knew it was illegal, but I was paid off and told to vanish. If anything happens to me, I want this on record." It ended with coordinates and a timestamp. Ava sat in stunned silence. The lie hadn't just originated with Lorraine. It had been cultivated, weaponized, and planted like a landmine by Vivienne herself. And the DNA test, the test that had ruined her engagement, cast her as an incestuous scandal, and shattered her identity, had never been real. Her first instinct was fury. Her second was strategy. She forwarded the file to a digital forensic expert Max Donovan trusted. Within hours, he confirmed the recording's authenticity and traced it to an abandoned voicemail server once owned by the Whitmore Foundation's now defunct Ethics Oversight Branch. It all lined up. Vivienne hadn't just manipulated her life, she'd orchestrated a full-scale deception to eliminate her. But the question still lingered. Why? Ava reran the DNA test, this time through a third-party lab with no political or social affiliations. No names, just codes and reference numbers. She submitted fresh samples under a pseudonym and waited. When the results returned, they confirmed it. 0% relation to Charles Whitmore. She wasn't Nathan's half-sister. She never had been. The realization hit her with a strange mix of relief and devastation. Her love for Nathan, her pure, uncomplicated love, had been real. Everything that had broken them apart had been rooted in a lie. But Vivienne hadn't made this move out of maternal instinct or moral horror. No, she had destroyed Ava's engagement for something else, something even deeper, darker, and more self-serving. Vivienne had wanted Ava out, not because of who Ava was, but because of what she might discover if she stayed. Ava thought back to her brief time working with the Whitmore Foundation, helping reorganize their philanthropic ledger, auditing campaign-linked charities, reviewing dormant offshore accounts that seemed oddly inflated. She had flagged some discrepancies but was told they were legacy items and not worth investigating further. She hadn't questioned it then. But now, she was beginning to see the connections. What if Ava's proximity to Nathan, and therefore Vivienne's financial world, posed a threat? What if the DNA deception was just one piece in a much bigger, more dangerous puzzle? She combed through her old audit notes, searching for patterns, and found something she hadn't seen before. A private fund titled Trillium Initiative, linked to 3 shell companies and 2 offshore accounts. The account holders? Anonymous. The access permissions? Limited, but Nathan's spouse would have shared access under Whitmore family trust guidelines. Ava's fingers froze over her keyboard. Vivienne hadn't feared Ava because of some family shame. She feared her because Ava had unknowingly wandered too close to a secret worth millions. The slap at the altar wasn't a punishment. It had been a smokescreen. Ava leaned back in her chair, every nerve alight with realization. The truth had been falsified, buried, and weaponized. But now she held the real story in her hands, and Vivienne had no idea what was coming. Ava had never been much of a hacker, but she was relentless. She didn't need to break into the Whitmore financial empire. She had already been let in, briefly, quietly. During the 6 months she worked on a pro bono audit for the Whitmore Foundation, Ava had access to financial ledgers, tax filings, charitable endowments, and blind trust accounts, all sanitized for public review. But buried within those files had been something Vivienne never imagined she would notice. Now, with fresh eyes and a growing web of evidence, Ava saw the truth. The Trillium Initiative was a front. Its stated mission was environmental sustainability through grassroots funding, but it had no active staff, no press coverage, and no disbursement record Ava could trace. What it did have was a hidden network of shell corporations tied to luxury real estate in Dubai, political consulting firms in Geneva, and an educational tech startup, registered to a non-existent address in the Cayman Islands. Vivienne had created a slush fund. Not just a clever way to hide money, but a method for laundering donations, covering up insider trading, and funneling illicit campaign financing across borders. The deception was so deeply rooted in philanthropic language that even government audits had cleared it. Until Ava came back. Working through Max's encrypted server, Ava compiled a damning dossier, complete with account routing numbers, falsified invoices, and copies of her original audit notes that had gone missing the day she was quietly asked to resign from the Foundation's advisory board. But the true keystone was a buried memo Max recovered from a whistleblower database. It was dated 2 years earlier and stamped confidential internal. The author, a former Foundation comptroller named Elise Tran. As of this writing, I am formally resigning from the Whitmore Foundation. I have raised concerns to Mrs. Vivienne Whitmore regarding financial inconsistencies between our charity reporting and actual capital movement, particularly involving the Trillium Initiative. My objections were met with silence, and I was subsequently removed from the executive loop. Elise had vanished from the public eye weeks after filing that memo. Her disappearance had been dismissed as retirement for personal reasons. Vivienne didn't just protect her fortune, she eliminated threats. Ava now had a choice. She could go public and ignite a media firestorm, or she could approach Vivienne directly, with leverage in hand, and demand restitution or war. She chose war. Ava booked a table at the Monarch, Vivienne's favorite private club in Manhattan, where the elite lunched behind ivory-paneled walls and scandals were traded like currency. Dressed in muted navy silk and armed with nothing but a black clutch and her dossier, Ava walked past the security checkpoint, ignoring the surprised looks of familiar faces. Vivienne was already seated wearing pearls and frost. She looked up from her tea and arched an eyebrow. "You've been busy," she said. "I know about Trillium," Ava replied, slipping the folder across the table, "and I have every document that proves it's a front." Vivienne's hand hovered above the folder for only a second before pulling it toward her. "You don't know what you're playing with," she said quietly. "I know enough," Ava replied. "Enough to end you." Vivienne didn't blink. "Then why are you here? Why not just leak it to the press?" "Because this is me giving you a chance," Ava said. "One chance to come clean. If you don't, I will bury you with your own secrets, the same way you tried to bury me with mine." For the first time, Ava saw fear flicker in Vivienne's eyes, quick and faint, like a candle fighting the wind. The Whitmore empire was cracking, and Ava wasn't finished yet. Ava didn't sleep the night before she saw him. She paced her suite like a prisoner counting steps, her mind torn between doubt and duty. She had the truth now. The lies, the evidence, the betrayal. Vivienne was cornered, exposed. But Nathan, he was still a mystery. She'd kept her distance for weeks, afraid that even seeing his face would trigger something she couldn't control. Rage? Grief? Longing? All three arrived the moment she saw him. He stood in the sculpture garden of the Met, where they used to steal afternoons before galas and gallery openings. He hadn't changed much. Same tailored coat, same clean-shaven jaw, but his eyes had lost their brightness. When he saw her, they widened with something like hope, and something darker buried beneath it. "Ava," he breathed. "God, it's really you." "I need to know the truth," she said without greeting, "and this time, Nathan, I want all of it." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I figured this day would come." They sat on a cold stone bench, surrounded by marble statues that felt more honest than they did. Ava didn't waste time. "When did you find out the DNA test was fake?" Nathan looked down at his hands. "A week after you left." "That's a lie." Her voice cracked like thunder. "You knew before the wedding, didn't you?" His silence confirmed it. "I saw the original results," he finally said, voice low. "I didn't want to believe them. When I confronted my mother, she admitted she had another test run. She said it was true, that you were his daughter, that we were half-siblings," Ava finished, her stomach turning. "I was devastated. I wanted to talk to you, to tell you everything. But she begged me not to. She said she was protecting us both, that it would ruin everything if we let it come out." "So you stood at the altar," Ava whispered, voice trembling, "knowing there was a chance we were related, and said nothing?" Nathan's eyes were glassy. "I thought maybe she was lying, that it wasn't true. I didn't want to believe it. I thought if we just got through the ceremony, everything else would work itself out." "But you weren't just afraid of the scandal," Ava said. "You were afraid of losing the Whitmore name, the legacy, the money." Nathan didn't answer, and in his silence she heard everything she needed to. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I wasn't the one destroying your family, Nathan. I was the one uncovering the truth." "I know that now," he said softly. "But by the time I realized what she'd done, you were already gone. And I didn't know how to fix it." Ava stood, clutching her coat. "You didn't try. That's the betrayal." He reached for her wrist. "Ava, please, I still love you." She shook her head. "You don't get to love me in silence. Not anymore." She walked away, heels striking the marble floor with purpose. Each step echoed not with heartbreak, but with clarity. The man she had loved was gone, and the woman she was becoming no longer needed saving. The ballroom was the same. The gilded chandeliers, the sweeping staircase, the same polished marble floor that had once echoed with whispered congratulations at her engagement party. But this time, Ava wasn't here as anyone's bride. This time, the attention wasn't borrowed or bestowed, it was demanded. Ava adjusted the lapel of her cream silk blazer, her presence a deliberate contrast to the morning black that Vivienne had made her signature in recent weeks. Cameras flashed from every direction, murmurs rising in waves as reporters realized who had just stepped up to the press podium at the Whitmore Foundation's annual charity gala. Vivienne wasn't there. Not yet. Not yet. But she would be watching. Ava had sent her the packet 2 hours earlier, an exact copy of the one she had handed over at the Monarch. Documents, audio files, DNA results, the confession, and a personal note. "If you try to silence me again, I'll make sure this goes to the SEC, the DOJ, and the front page of every outlet you can't buy. Tonight is your last chance to step down." Vivienne had sent no reply, but Ava knew she'd show her hand soon enough. The microphone crackled, and the room hushed. "Good evening," Ava began, her voice calm, measured, lethal. "My name is Ava Sinclair. I was once engaged to Nathan Whitmore. Many of you attended that wedding, or, more accurately, that public humiliation." A nervous ripple of laughter. Ava let it hang. "What you don't know," she continued, "is why that moment happened, and what it was meant to cover up." She reached down and pulled a leather folder from her bag, opening it slowly. The Whitmore Foundation has long been considered a pillar of American philanthropy, a model of political and financial responsibility. But behind the press releases and charity galas is a system built on fraud, laundering, and calculated deceit. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Over the last 2 years, the foundation, under the direction of Vivienne Whitmore, used a shell organization known as the Trillium Initiative to reroute millions in donor funds to offshore accounts, purchase silent ownership in political consulting firms, and launder insider trading profits under the guise of environmental aid. Gasps broke out across the room. Phones were raised. Someone near the back started live streaming. Ava went on, reading excerpts from the whistleblower memo, referencing falsified ledgers, tracing a money trail that led from Wall Street to Monaco. And when I got too close to uncovering these connections, she said, I became a threat. Not through violence, through something worse, manufactured shame. A falsified DNA test, a scandal designed to destroy my credibility, my engagement, and my reputation in a single public moment. She took a breath, then locked eyes with the nearest camera. But I am not the dirty girl she claimed I was. I am the woman who saw through her mask. Then, with the full weight of her truth behind her, she made the final blow. Effective immediately, I am submitting this evidence to the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and a consortium of journalistic institutions. The Whitmore Foundation will be investigated, and those responsible, including Vivienne Whitmore, will answer. As Ava stepped back, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Security rushed to control the crowd, and through the glass of the mezzanine above, a single figure could be seen watching, motionless, pale, and still as a statue. Vivienne. Her empire was crumbling, and this time, no amount of money, legacy, or lies could hold the walls up. Ava turned and walked out into the night. Not escorted, not protected, just free. 6 months later, spring returned to New York with a strange softness. The city had thawed, and so had Ava Sinclair. She stood on the steps of the Avery Institute, once a quiet community space, now the headquarters of her new nonprofit, the Lighthouse Foundation, a beacon for whistleblowers, investigative journalists, and those threatened into silence by wealth and power. Where the Whitmore Foundation had once deflected scrutiny with gala gowns and camera-ready smiles, Ava's foundation thrived on truth and transparency. Inside, walls were lined not with donor plaques, but stories. Survivors. Leaks that changed laws. Anonymous names etched in gold leaf beneath the words, "Courage begins with a whisper." Ava had finally found her voice. The media whirlwind had been relentless at first. Talk shows, podcasts, op-eds that called her everything from a phoenix in pearls to the woman who broke the American aristocracy. Her memoir, Unveiled, became a bestseller within 2 weeks of publication. Its cover, a black and white photo of Ava standing outside the church where she had been slapped, head held high, veil in her hand. Vivienne Whitmore, meanwhile, had been indicted on 8 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. The courtroom sketches were poetic. The once unshakable matriarch hunched behind her lawyers, her pearl necklace conspicuously absent, her eyes empty. She pled not guilty on all charges. Nathan had tried to contact Ava twice. The first time was through a letter, handwritten, trembling. He apologized, explained, said he hadn't known the full extent of his mother's crimes until they were exposed in court. He claimed he had been a pawn, too. Ava read the letter once. She didn't respond. The second time, he appeared in person. It was a quiet afternoon. Ava had just wrapped a panel with investigative journalists and was grabbing coffee from the cafe near her office. When she turned, there he was, taller than she remembered, but somehow smaller, too. "Ava," he said softly. She looked at him for a long moment, the world slowing just enough to allow her memory to speak. He had once been her entire future. Now, he was just part of her past. "I'm happy you're doing well," he said, genuine. "You look free." "I am," she replied with a softness he hadn't expected. He hesitated. "Would you ever?" "No," she said gently. "Not because I hate you, I don't. But I've rewritten my story. And I don't need the old ending anymore." He nodded, accepting it, and walked away without another word. Later that night, Ava sat on the rooftop of the Avery Institute, watching the skyline. Wind teased the edge of her coat. She held a glass of wine in one hand and her mother's final letter in the other, faded, tear-streaked, but full of forgiveness. "I see you now," Lorraine had written, "and I'm proud." Ava smiled. Some legacies are inherited, others are stolen. But the most powerful kind are reclaimed. As the sun dipped below the city and the stars blinked awake, Ava Sinclair rose from her chair, shoulders straight, past behind her, and a future entirely her own stretching forward like an open road.